Support for this News from Lake Wobegon podcast comes from the Sleep Number bed by Select Comfort, the bed that lets you adjust the mattress firmness to your preference, your sleep number.
And by Grand's Biscuits. Your Grand's Biscuits from the refrigerator are now also available in the freezer, so you can make as many or as few as you need. You can enjoy the home-baked taste of Grand's Biscuits tonight.
Well, it's been a quiet week in Lake Wobegon, my hometown, out there on the edge of the prairie. Summer finally got blown away on Monday, and a cold front came in, much to our great relief, and that October heat wave that made us nervous and uneasy, just not suitable for us. We are northern people. You don't feel right in being hot in October. That's why we don't do well in the South. It just doesn't suit us whatsoever. No northerner has ever come south and distinguished himself. Some people were distinguished when they came here, and that's why they got the offer to come down here. But they got down here in the heat, and then 10 years later, there they still were. They were sitting on the porch, and they were drinking this very sweet iced tea, and they were talking about the Second Coming and the Battle of Antietam and the right way to fry chicken, and nothing much had happened with their careers. See, we are northern people. And we need cold, just like apple trees do. They need to be cold. And so it came in. This tremendous cold front came in on Monday, and we just felt better. It was a great day, cloudy and kind of an Old Testament clouds up in the sky and kind of a cold prophetic rain falling. It was a good day to walk around and brood and go to the cemetery and maybe sit around and read a Russian novel and sit down and write a letter to your sister telling how lost and miserable and lonely you are, and then using that letter to start a fire in the fireplace. See, it's all good. Life is all good. You just need the right attitude, that's all. Life is all just a big comedy. You just need to know where to look, that's all. And it was a comedy on Monday. It was Columbus Day. And the post office was closed, and so was the bank, but people still came into town to go to the bank and the post office, so they wound up at the Chatterbox Cafe, where Dorothy's special for the day was French-Canadian toast, which she explained was a recipe from her great-great-grandmother. It was different, not French toast, French-Canadian toast, but had too much egg in it for these old people sitting back there in the booths, and they're all so set in their ways, and they just couldn't abide it. They said, we asked for French toast. This is scrambled eggs with some bread in it, that's all. She explained this is the way you make French-Canadian toast, but they weren't listening to her, so they just put it aside. They weren't hungry, so they said. They didn't eat much of it at all. People in sort of a cross mood as the cold front moves in. People who've been to Florida too often have been to Arizona, and so they're deacclimated, and so they become owly when this happens. It was a real cold wave. We had a high on Sunday in the mid to high 80s, and then by Tuesday night it was down to the low 40s, almost a frost, didn't quite freeze. But it came too late for Mr. Vic, one of the Norwegian bachelor farmers. He died on Monday night from the heat, you see, from the heat wave. Norwegian bachelors are very susceptible to heat. It loosens up their bodily parts, and they fall apart, and it makes them logy and not care anymore. And he was having to get up in the night and pee every hour. And in the heat, he just slept. And so he died of pee poisoning, and he had a big funeral, Mr. Vic did, on yesterday, actually, in Lake Wobegon, a big funeral. All of his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren were there. He was one of those who come late to Norwegian bachelorhood. You see, it was his children who really drove him into it. He married his high school sweetheart, Anna, and she wanted to name their children after months of the year, so they had girls. They had April, and they had May, and they had June, and then they had Julie, and then a boy came along, as if by divine providence. They named him August, and that was fine. And by now, Anna was just starting to get really interested. And Mr. Vick said, no, that's it. That's no more. No more for us. We're not going to name a child September. Never. So he went out and slept in the shed and discovered that he liked it pretty well. Some men start out with celibacy, others come to it later. And he liked living alone, without supervision of any sort. So Pastor Inquist preached his funeral sermon on Friday. He has a special sermon for the unchurched, which emphasizes God's limitless mercy and goes rather light on issues of righteousness, which was good in Mr. Vick's case. He was a man who smoked heavily and who drank everything he could get his hands on or borrow. And even though he was embalmed and there were flowers, you could still smell his essence. It was sort of like smoked venison coming from the casket. It was interesting. Fall, all the pumpkins are out now for sale, great big pyramids of pumpkins for sale out at the ends of driveways and piled on hay racks, and just a little coffee can there. You put your money in, $3 for a little one, $4 for the medium, and $5 for the large. And the money, for some reason, is not stolen at all, ever, from a coffee can. People respect that. Also, people think that somebody might be looking, and it would be so shameful to steal somebody's pumpkin money out of there. The soybeans are mostly in. Some of the corn is in. They're waiting for the rest to dry a little bit. This dramatic time in the farm season in Lake Wobegon, where these combine crews, combines owned by contractors who come and work out a deal with you to combine your corn for you. Too big an investment for most farmers. The combines and the trucks are all run by small, dark-skinned, silent men. They're not from here. We don't know where they're from. They say nothing whatsoever. Silent men who sit off in the shadows and smoke and sleep a little bit and wait for its time. It's a small window to do the combining between the time when the corn matures and it's dry enough and before the big snow comes in that would make it difficult and also make the snow wet. And so you have to have ferocious workers to do this job. And these small, dark-skinned men are ferocious workers. They can be at the wheel of a combine 14 hours, and then they'll go lie down and sleep for 3 hours and come back and work another 14. They do this regularly. They work at night. They work all day. Most of us don't do that, you see. Most of us have lifestyles. And we are leery of hard work because we have read articles warning against it and against stress and overexertion. And so we've come to think of ferocious hard work as a bad habit, but sometimes bad habits are absolutely necessary. We live and die, this town does, by these small, dark-skinned men who never say anything. They work. We can see their headlights out in the field going back and forth. We can hear them in the night. And then they move on. They move on to the west and off to the south, cutting a swath across the country. It was a quiet, cool night the other night, that Monday night in Lake Wobegon when that cold front moved in. And the Bunsons lay in bed, Clarence and Arlene. Arlene, when this first cold front moves in, she starts to read Dostoevsky, and she likes to look at the Mayo Family Medical Encyclopedia and read articles about cancer and so forth. Clarence sits there in bed beside her, wondering if he should ask if something is wrong, but he does not ask because he has a lot of things on his own mind. Bunsen Motors, slow summer and fall in car sales, most people going into the big city now to buy cars at a discount from Cronky Ford, not too many people coming through the door, but now the shop is very, very busy. Clarence, you see, is the salesman, new and used Fords, and his brother Clint runs the shop, and now the shop is extremely busy. All these old guys coming in with their cars to have the tires rotated and the oil changed and the timing fixed, and these are guys with a lot of time to stand around and schmooze and reminisce about things and yik-yak and give you all sorts of advice about how you ought to do your job. And Clint just got fed up with it. And he came into Clarence's office. Clarence sitting there by a brand new Ford, hasn't sold now in 3 months. And he said, how about you help out in the shop back here? You could change oil. Doesn't take a lot of mechanical aptitude. Well, Clarence said, no, I just don't think so. Selling is a psychological thing, and when somebody comes in to buy a car, you want to be there waiting for them so that they know that something is coming now. You don't want them to walk in and find the place empty, and then you come out of the shop and wiping oil off your hands. This says something to your customer. It says, first of all, you're not a salesman, so you may not know what you're talking about. And secondly, he's interrupted you at a piece of work, and he might just say, well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'll come back when you're less busy. And he will go off and buy a Ford at Cronky Ford in the city, where they make their money on financing. They don't make it on the car, so they can sell it for hundreds of dollars less. So Clarence felt bad about it, this argument between him and his brother. They were very silent, thin-lipped with each other for the rest of the day. He was thinking about it that Monday night. And then the phone rang, and it was Clint. He was on the phone. He said, I'm sorry to call you so late. I hope I didn't wake you up, but I've been thinking about this all day, and I just think maybe it's time we get out of the business and close down this Ford agency. We're part of another era. I mean, people want to buy their cars for less money, and I can't blame them. But they feel embarrassed about going out of town to buy it, and so they're embarrassed to run into us in church, and they're shamefaced. Let's just stop embarrassing people. Let's get out of this business and shut this down. We're part of another era, don't you see? We're part of an old era of brown fedoras and home canned tomatoes and radio and Percheron horses and all the rest of it. Just shut this thing down and let's go off and find out what else life has to offer. Well, Clarence didn't know what to say. And then there was a scream ran out in town. It came from way downtown. They could hear it, blood-curdling scream. It came from down by the Chatterbox Cafe. Clarence got into his trousers, jumped in his car, and he drove down there fast as he could. Clint did as well. 10 other men did too. They all came down to the Chatterbox Cafe, and there was Darlene sitting in the kitchen. She had gone out back, took the garbage out to the dumpster, and she saw something glittering on the ground, and she reached down toward it, and it hissed at her. It was the eyeballs of a raccoon who was waiting for dinner to be served. She threw this garbage up into the air, and she tore with a blood-curdling scream back into the kitchen. Meanwhile, the raccoon was grateful. The bag had split, and here was a whole feast of French-Canadian toast. Which was very much to his liking. It was not too eggy for him. It was French toast just the way this raccoon liked it. He ate every single piece of it. See, life is good. It's all good. It's just your attitude. This is the whole thing. She ran into the kitchen. She was hysterical for a while. Hysterical for a time, but by the time they got down there, she was laughing and laughing. She'd recovered her senses. Life is a comedy. You just need to know where to look. That's the news from Lake Wobegon, where all the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and all the children are above average.
Support for this podcast comes from Grand's Biscuits. Your Grand's Biscuits from the refrigerator are now also available in the freezer, so you can make as many or as few as you need. You can enjoy the home-baked taste of Grand's Biscuits tonight.